Alright guys, welcome back to my little talk show. Anyways, so I just came back from the theater after just seeing Afraid, produced by Blumhouse Production, and let's just say it's not looking very hot, right? So going to the movie, I didn't expect to like it very much. My expectations for the movie was already really freaking low, because like I don't have a lot of faith in Blumhouse Production. Like every time I ever see Blumhouse Production come up in the trailer or whatever, immediately that sounds off an alarm in my head, or a red flag goes off in my head. So now that I came out of the movie, it somehow surpassed my expectations to be really bad. My very low expectations that it somehow surpassed. I do think this is probably one of the worst movies produced all year up to this point. Like, people are probably going to say Madam Web's the worst movie of the year, or Borderlands the worst movie of the year, or even the Crow remake. But the only reason people are saying those are the worst movies of the year is because of the spotlight around those movies as the worst movie of the year. This, on the other hand, I feel like it's going to go under the radar. But not with me though, because I'm gonna expose this movie to my two viewers. And you know, I will say to those three movies credit, like Madam Web, Borderlands, or The Crow. Like, there are times in those movies where I'm like, oh, I see what they're trying to do in the scene, I see what they're getting at, they just didn't do it properly, or they didn't execute on the idea very good or very well. Whereas this movie, I didn't see any of that. This is one of the first movies in a very long while I've seen in theaters where I can say, wow, that was pretty incomprehensible. Because right away, this movie feels very passionless, visionless, very soulless. Like, any list you could say about this movie is very applicable.
Maidenless.
Because this movie just feels like a cash grab. And remember that, because that's actually gonna be very important later in the conversation down the line. And like, I don't even know where to begin to say what this movie does wrong. Like the writing was just awful. You could tell like nobody really gave a damn in the writing room. They just pumped this just for the sake of pumping it out. Like, this movie only exists to be relevant around the heavy discourse around the subject of AI right now. And crazy enough, this movie has nothing substantial to say about the subject matter. Anything it could possibly say, there's already other movies that have said it or done it better than this movie has. One of the first examples that come to mind, because I just saw it recently in theaters for its 40th anniversary, was Terminator, the 1984 film by James Cameron. I think iRobot kind of, you know, talked about this issue as well. And then there's Ex Machina, I think that's what it's called. Okay, iRobot I haven't seen in a fat minute. Ex Machina, I've never seen it, period. So hard for me to say. You know what? I think the creator had a better approach to this conversation than this movie does. And that movie's writing was kind of atrocious as well. And I don't know, man. I don't know what else to say, man. Like, there's just nothing really of substantial worth for me to say about the movie. Like, it just felt very wrong. It doesn't even feel like a movie. A lot of the dialogue were written so poorly. The story progression felt extremely rushed. So therefore, the movie's pacing was all over the place, and there's like almost no character motivation that was established properly either. Like, it's just so dumb. Like, things just happen on a flip of a coin for the most part. It's just awful. And that's really all I have to say about this movie. And I want to spoil this movie, but like, I don't even know what to spoil to prove my point, right? It's just so bad. Am I gonna say you shouldn't go watch this movie? Probably not, to be honest, because like, you know, I am a firm believer in just hate watching things if permitted. It's Discount Tuesday at Cinemark, so I'm not losing out too much financially. But this does lead to the next part of the conversation, and I kind of want to talk about Blumhouse for a little bit. So like I said, when I was watching this movie, I was like, oh, this really feels like a cash grab, because like I said, it feels very passionless, very visionless. There's nothing special to it, and you could tell this movie was very lazily made. And I can't get mad at the production team either, because I feel like everyone on the production crew were like just doing this for a paycheck. Like John Cho, I was like, yeah, this dude's just in it for the paycheck for sure, and I don't blame him. The rest of the cast, same thing. And then there's even David, let me check his name, David Dashmotion, like an actual, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, I feel bad. But, you know, like I said, he's an actual actor, and he was in this movie for some reason. And yeah, I will say what little he did have to do, he did feel like an actual character that was being acted out. But all in all, this movie really did just feel like a cash grab. This movie really just felt like a paycheck for most of the cast and crew. And I had a sneaky suspicion, so I kind of hit up my friend who has a stronger behind the scenes than I do. And this is what he had to say.
So Blumhouse business model is essentially spend as little money as possible on usually horror properties, because horror movies always make money, right? Because of people basically always want to see a horror movie or always are going to go on a date and want to go to a horror movie so that there's physical contact happening on accident or some bullshit like that. But basically that's the model, and if it makes a certain amount, like let's say like 10 times the budget, which is more than likely if you spend less than $1 million or like $3 million on a huge movie getting wide distribution, then that becomes franchise, right? It's a very simple business model, and it's very successful for a reason. And people now recognize his name associated with these like hyped up, or, you know, these like poppy horror films that are going to be, you know, like potentially franchise potential and shit. Except what's interesting about Blumhouse is every now and then he'll just like produce a good movie. Like he'll give a talented person like the money to do something cool. Like he produced Whiplash, and I think it's Get Out that he also produced. But like that's once in a blue moon, basically. Sorry, I just got off work. It was much easier to just speak all this.
Yeah, so remember what I said about this movie being a cash grab? After he told me that, everything literally just lined up perfectly. And another note that my friend made that he didn't include in his voice memo was that, you know, it's not Jason Blum's fault, or not entirely, that he does. I like to think he does run the business model the way he does. So, and to a certain degree, I do think he should be held accountable. But when I say held accountable, what I mean is that, you know, this movie really felt like, you know, a huge stain or huge disrespect to the art of filmmaking. And he funds these movies to exist. Like, a lot of people right now are like complaining that, you know, that Disney is like a stain to cinema right now, right? Or it is a stain to filmmaking or whatever. But like, I think Blumhouse is a lot worse. So before this year, you know, people were complaining that Marvel was just producing projects left and right into theaters or onto their streaming services. But at the same time, you know, Blumhouse might not be producing shows left and right, but they're still cheaply producing multiple movies per year. But you know, I'm not gonna say Blumhouse doesn't have a place in cinema, because like my friend said earlier, you know, because considering the fact that they're producing like multiple projects a year, you know, and I just want like a quick cheap horror fix or whatever, especially like on a date night or something I can have, or I just want a cheap horror I can laugh at, right? Like I can count on Blumhouse having something in theaters almost year round for the most part. But I don't think I want to consider Blumhouse as an art house per se. And that's not to say that everything that Blumhouse has ever produced or touched are all stinkers. It's mostly just the past half decade or so. So this year alone, you have Night Swim and Imaginary. I skipped out on those, but out of the two people that watched those movies, they've all expressed that neither movie are very good. And then last year we had Five Nights at Freddy's, which I thought was also pretty bad. And let's be real here, and let's be honest with ourselves, especially for the people really coping around this movie. Fan service does not equate to quality. Otherwise, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City would probably be like the best movie ever made. And then we also had Megan that came out last year, which I thought was a pleasant surprise. I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to. However, I don't think it's worth going out of your way to watch still. However, if it like shows up on your streaming platform of choice or whatever on a lazy night in, I say sure, whatever, give it a watch if you don't have anything else to watch, you know. And then there's also The Black Phone, which I also didn't like very much either. I thought that movie had a lot of problems, but looking at this lineup I just named out, Afraid included, The Black Phone unironically looks like a masterpiece next to all of them. And then Blumhouse has like another film coming out in a couple weeks or so called Speak No Evil. But the issue with that is it kind of goes back to my point about being visionless and passionless or whatever, right? It's literally just a remake of another movie. Not just another movie, but another movie that came out barely 2 years ago by the time the remakes had come out. And knowing Blumhouse, I don't think it's going to be a very good remake. I don't know what the reception was on the original anyways, so it's kind of whatever, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, it's been a very long while since I watched a movie, and I just felt very disrespected through the medium that I love so much, being filmmaking. I haven't felt this way since Shazam 2 Fear of the Gods. However, I will say, unlike Shazam, I actually laughed at this movie. So you know what? This movie wins marginally. It wins marginally, but that's about it. I don't know if I want to go ahead and place this in one of the worst. I don't know if I want to rank this movie as one of the worst movies I've ever seen alongside Shazam 2. But depending on my mood when you ask me, I might just say yes. It is indeed one of the worst movies I've ever seen. But yeah, with that being said, that's my thoughts on afraid. More so my thoughts on Blumhouse than the actual movie itself, because there's really not much to say, right? It's just not worth watching, period. I don't even know if I want to consider this a good date night choice to scratch a horror itch or whatever. I'd rather watch Alien Romulus, to be honest. And like I said, I didn't think that movie was scary at all. Oh, you know what I'd rather watch? I'd rather watch Blink Twice. Blink Twice wasn't even a horror, but like it tackled its horror aspects or horror elements a lot better than this movie did. But yeah, okay, I'm officially done. I'm gonna stop rambling. There's not much for me to say left. What's that thing that YouTubers would say all the time? Like, comment, subscribe. Yeah, I'm never gonna not cringe saying that, so please do that so I don't have to keep saying it. Anyways, bye.